The Whitford gallery had 91 images left. Natalie sat at her desk at home and moved through them the way she'd trained herself to. 2 seconds on a frame. Flag or skip. Move on. The pace was good for an hour and a half, maybe 2, before her eyes would start making decisions she'd have to undo in the morning. She stopped on a frame of the bride's mother adjusting the veil. 2 fingers near the left temple, a small tuck, and the bride's eyes were closed. The mother's face held the expression of someone concentrating very carefully on not showing one. Natalie flagged it. These were the images clients never asked for and always loved. The ones where someone was caught in the middle of something. She moved to the next frame. The moment was over. The mother had stepped back. The bride had opened her eyes and was already turning toward the mirror. Natalie skipped it and moved on. Her phone buzzed against a stack of invoices near the edge of the desk. She glanced at the screen. Brooke, you working? Finishing the Whitford gallery. Dinner at Mom and Dad's tonight. Can you come? 7. What's going on? Just come, Brooke said, and Natalie could hear it. The held-back quality in her voice, the way she got when she was sitting on something good. Brooke had never been able to hide anticipation. When they were kids, she'd buy a birthday present weeks in advance and then spend the rest of the time dropping hints so obvious that Natalie would have to pretend not to get them, because the pretending was part of the gift. I'll be there, Natalie said. She hung up and turned back to the screen, but the rhythm was off. She sat with the next image a few seconds longer than she should have, not really seeing it. She saved her place, shut the monitor down, and figured the rest could wait till morning. She lay on the bed for a few minutes and let her back settle, then changed out of the shirt she'd been wearing all day and left the apartment without checking the mirror. The drive took 12 minutes. She pulled in behind Brooke's Civic and a gray Subaru she recognized as Kyle's. Inside, Elaine was pulling a baking dish out of the oven with both hands, her chin tilted up and away from the steam. She set it on the trivet, nudged it half an inch, and turned back to the stove where something else was already going. Randall stood at the counter holding a serving spoon, waiting for somewhere to put it. He nodded at Natalie. Brooke sat at the table next to Kyle, who looked, as he always did, like a guy who'd just gotten good news and was trying real hard to play it cool. Hey, Natalie said. She set her bag on the bench by the door and sat down across from Brooke. Dinner was meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and braised cabbage. Elaine served. Randall asked Kyle about a project in Harrisonburg, something with stormwater permits. And Kyle answered with the careful thoroughness of a man who might be talking to his future father-in-law. Brooke watched him talk, her hand resting near his plate, not quite touching it. Between the main course and dessert, Brooke put her fork down. So, she said, we're thinking a Saturday in October. Elaine's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. We're getting married, Brooke said. Kyle put his hand over hers. Brooke smiled. This October. Elaine was out of her chair before the sentence landed. She held Brooke's face in both hands and said something Natalie couldn't quite catch. Randall stood and shook Kyle's hand, then pulled him in for a hug, which seemed to throw Kyle's hand, then pulled him in for a hug, which seemed to throw Kyle more than the handshake had. Brooke laughed. Elaine sat back down and said she needed to call Kathleen tonight, though nobody had asked her to call anyone. Natalie watched all of it. When the noise died down enough for Brooke to look her way, Natalie smiled at her and said, Brooke. That was all she said. Brooke's eyes went bright and she laughed and reached across the table and grabbed Natalie's wrist. I know, she said. I know. The table settled. Randall opened a bottle of wine he said he'd been saving for the right occasion, and this was it. Elaine started listing relatives who'd need to be told in person. Kyle poured Brooke a glass and then poured one for Natalie without being asked, which was the most natural thing she'd ever seen him do. Natalie held her glass and waited for the first round of logistics to pass. Venues around the valley Elaine had been to or heard good things about. Weekends, Randall needed to check against work. Then she said it. I want to shoot the wedding. The table went quiet. As my gift, she said. 8 hours of coverage on the day. I'll hire a second shooter myself. Full gallery after. Culled, edited, delivered. Brooke stared at her. Nat, she looked at Kyle, then back. That's way too much. It's my gift, Natalie said. Kyle leaned forward. Natalie, that's incredibly generous. Seriously. Thank you. Elaine pressed both palms flat on the table, the way she did when she was moved and didn't want to make a thing of it. That's beautiful, she said. She looked at Randall. Isn't that beautiful? Randall looked at Natalie. He held her eyes for a moment, proud, she thought, or something close to it, and nodded. Hell of a gift, he said. Brooke got up and came around the table and wrapped her arms around Natalie from behind. Natalie felt her sister's chin on top of her head, the slight pressure of Brooke leaning into the hug the way she always did. Like standing on her own during an embrace was an unnecessary formality. You sure? Brooke said into Natalie's hair. I'm sure. The conversation moved on to guest counts, catering, whether Kyle's parents would want to host the rehearsal dinner. Natalie listened and drank her wine. At one point, Elaine reached across the table and patted Natalie's hand, quickly, almost absently, the way you'd tap a railing to make sure it was solid before putting your full weight on it. 3 weeks before the wedding, Elaine called on a Monday afternoon. Natalie was between edits, eating a sandwich at her desk with one hand and adjusting highlights on a reception gallery with the other. So the rehearsal dinner's going to be bigger than we thought, Elaine said. Your Uncle Glenn and Marlene are driving up Thursday. The Paulsons are coming in Friday morning. And Kathleen's bringing Margaret, which I didn't expect, but that's fine. Margaret was Kathleen's daughter-in-law. Elaine listed a few more names Natalie half recognized. Anyway, a lot of these people haven't been in the same room in years. I was thinking, since he'll be there Friday night anyway, could you bring a camera and get some pictures? Just for an hour or so. Nothing formal. Natalie set her sandwich down. Yeah, I can do that. Great. That would be wonderful. Elaine paused, but it was the kind of pause that meant she was already thinking about the next thing. Oh, and Sunday morning we're doing a little farewell brunch before everyone heads home. If you could swing by with your camera for that too, just to grab a few shots before people leave? I can't do Sunday, Natalie said. I need to back everything up and start processing. It would just be quick. 20 minutes maybe. I know, but Sunday's when I have to get everything offloaded. If I don't do it right away, I'll be behind on everything else. Okay. Elaine said it the way she said okay to most things she didn't agree with. Lightly, with a little lift at the end, as if she were setting it down somewhere she could pick it back up later. What about Saturday night? After everything wraps up, could you just pull a few of the best ones and send them to the family text? So people have something to share while they're all still together? That's not really how it works, Mom. I'll have a couple thousand images to sort through before I can send anything. Even just 2 or 3? I'd rather do it right. You'll get the full gallery. All right. Elaine laughed a little. I just get excited. You know how I am, men, I know. They talked for another minute about table linens and whether the corsage colors would stand out enough against the mother's dresses. Then Elaine said she had to run. She was meeting Brooke to look at ceremony programs, and they hung up. Natalie sat with the phone for a moment. Then she opened a text to Brooke. Just want to make sure we're on the same page. Here's what I've got. About an hour of shooting at the rehearsal dinner Friday night. 8 hours of coverage Saturday, starting with getting ready. Second shooter during the ceremony and reception. Full gallery after, edited and delivered. That's the package. 3 dots appeared. Then, I know. It's already a huge gift. Natalie set the phone down and went back to her edits. The relatives started arriving Thursday. By Friday afternoon, the ones in the ceremony had gathered at the venue for the rehearsal. It was short. The coordinator walked everyone through positions, timing, and the recessional. And then it was over. The wedding party, both sets of parents, and a handful of close relatives moved on to the rehearsal dinner at a nice restaurant nearby, where the private room and back had been set with long tables, low clusters of bronze mums and cream roses tucked into greenery, and enough chairs for 40. Natalie brought one camera. No flash, no extra lenses. Just the body with a 50mm, small enough to hang at her side between shots. She found a spot near the entrance and watched people settle. Elaine was already moving between tables, greeting everyone who came through the door, keeping track of who'd arrived and who hadn't. She stopped at a table near the windows where a woman with short gray hair and reading glasses pushed up on top of her head was shaking out a napkin. Aunt Kathleen. Elaine slid into the chair next to her, and the two of them fell into conversation in the way that only sisters who'd been talking to each other for 60 years could, mid-sentence, mid-thought, neither one needing to finish a sentence for the other to understand it. At some point, Elaine opened the small clutch she was carrying and fished out a few hard butterscotch candies in gold foil wrappers. She set one in front of Kathleen and unwrapped one for herself, still talking, the gesture as automatic as breathing. Natalie raised her camera and started working the room. She moved from table to table, a few candids, a couple of small groups, two cousins who hadn't seen each other in years standing shoulder to shoulder, grinning while someone behind them was already reaching for a drink. She shot it all clean and quick. One camera, available light, no direction. She'd told Elaine an hour and she intended to keep it to an hour. Around the 50-minute mark she lowered the camera and checked the time. Almost done. Across the room, Elaine caught her eye. She was standing with a group of relatives near the bar, Uncle Glenn, Marlene, and a couple Natalie thought might be Kyle's great-aunt and her husband, though she wasn't sure. Behind them, another small cluster had just formed, 3 women and a man Natalie vaguely recognized from a family reunion several years back. Elaine walked over. "Just these two," she said, tilting her head toward the groups. "Everyone's right here." Natalie looked at her watch. She looked at the groups. They were already there, already standing together, already smiling in her direction. It would take 2 minutes. She lifted the camera. The 2 groups became 3 because one of the women pulled her husband over and then someone else stepped in and asked if they could get one more, and by then another cluster had noticed the camera and drifted closer. Natalie kept shooting. Each one only took a minute. Each one was right there. The hour became an hour and 20 minutes. When the last group broke apart, Natalie lowered the camera and put the lens cap on. Most of the guests had already ordered. She found a spot next to Kathleen and flagged down a server. "You eat yet?" Kathleen asked. "About to." She ordered late, a wild mushroom ravioli, and ate while the room loosened around her. Kathleen leaned in and told her, quietly, that she'd just found out Kyle's uncle had driven up from Charlottesville in a 3-piece suit and cowboy boots. "He shook my hand with both of his and held on so long I had to look around for help," Kathleen said. Natalie almost choked on her ravioli. When she finished, she said goodnight to Brooke, who was deep in conversation with 2 bridesmaids and barely looked up, and hugged Kathleen on the way out. "Get some sleep," Kathleen said. At home, Natalie plugged in the camera batteries, backed up the evening's photos to her laptop, and laid out her gear for the morning. She set her alarm for 7:45, got into bed, and lay in the dark running through the wedding day timeline the way she always did the night before a shoot, ceremony start time, golden hour window, family formal groups, reception entrance, until the list blurred and she was asleep. The Staunton Farmers Market was still going when Natalie pulled into the wharf lot a little after 11:20 Saturday morning. She'd had breakfast at home, eggs, toast, coffee, and taken her time getting ready. Coverage didn't start until noon, and she liked arriving with enough room to walk the space and settle in before picking up the camera. She got out of the car and opened the trunk. 2 camera bodies, 3 lenses, 2 speed lights, extra batteries, memory cards, a small pouch with lens cloths and gaffer tape. She touched each item once, the way she always did before a wedding, not counting exactly, but confirming. Making sure everything was where her hands would expect it to be when the day started moving fast, and she couldn't afford to look down. The air was cool and sharp. Across the lot, the market stalls were busy. Vendors in canvas aprons, families with strollers, a line forming in front of a truck selling apple cider donuts. Natalie could smell them from where she stood, deep-fried and sugared, the kind of thing that made people stop walking without deciding to. The line was 8 or 9 people deep. She had time, but she wanted to get inside first, walk the ceremony site, check the light in the getting ready room, and be ready before anyone needed her. She closed the trunk and walked past the stall. The venue was a restored warehouse in the Wharf District. Brick and tall windows, the kind of place that photographed well in the late afternoon light Natalie was counting on for portraits. She'd scouted it with Brooke the month before, walked the courtyard, noted where the light would come through the trees at different hours. Today was Brooke's day, but it was also a shoot, and Natalie had put more prep into this one than any she'd done for a paying client. Inside, Elaine was already there, standing near the entrance talking to the coordinator with a checklist in her hand. Her hair was set, but she wasn't dressed yet. Elaine paused mid-sentence with the coordinator, then turned to Natalie. I just remembered Brooke's things for the reception tables are still in my car. Some decor pieces she spent weeks tracking down. Can you run out and grab them? I need to unload my own gear first, Natalie said. It'll only take a minute. The sentence landed somewhere familiar. A Sunday supper? A couple of years back. Natalie had been living on her own about 6 months, working as an assistant at a portrait studio downtown. Elaine was hosting a backyard dinner for neighbors and a few friends, and Natalie had told her she couldn't make it. She had a wedding gallery to cull and file so the lead photographer could start editing Monday morning. Early that afternoon, Elaine called. A few things had backed up. Could Natalie stop by for 20 minutes just to help her get ahead of it? Natalie drove over. She set up the serving table, went out front to meet an older friend of Elaine's, then ran to the store for ice because Elaine had underestimated how much she'd need. By the time she got back, guests were already arriving, and Elaine asked if she could stay just until everyone was settled. 20 minutes became nearly 3 hours. Before she left, Natalie ate a small plate standing in the kitchen, then drove home. She sat in front of her laptop past midnight finishing the cull she'd promised. The next morning, Elaine sent a few photos to the family group text. Last night turned out so nice. Couldn't have pulled it off without Natalie. Randall replied. Knew we could count on her. Elaine was still looking at her. She held out her car keys. A distant cousin was standing near the entrance, hands in his jacket pockets, looking like he wasn't sure where to go. Natalie took the keys from Elaine's hand and turned to him. Hey, can you grab 2 bins out of my mom's car? The silver Highlander. They're in the back. He took the keys and headed outside. Elaine watched him go, a flicker of something crossing her face. Not quite surprise, not quite anything. And then turned back to the coordinator. Natalie went to unload her own gear. Coverage started on time. Natalie shot the dress hanging in the window, backlit, the beading catching the sun. The rings on a piece of stationery Brooke had chosen. The bouquets lined up on a table, stems wrapped in ivory ribbon. The invitation suite, cream cardstock, hand-lettered, the edges sharp and clean. She took her time with each one, knowing these were the images Brooke would use for years after in frames and albums and on the wall above the mantel she didn't have yet. Then the getting ready room. Brooke sitting in a salon chair while the makeup artist worked on her eyes. Bridesmaids in robes, holding coffee cups, one of them reading something off her phone that made 2 others laugh and a third cover her mouth. Elaine arriving already dressed, moving straight to Brooke, checking a detail on her sash that no one else had noticed. She smoothed it once with the flat of her hand and said something quiet that made Brooke close her eyes and nod. Natalie got all of it. Elaine had the shot list they'd discussed. Or rather, she had a version of it. Sometime between the rehearsal dinner and this morning, it had grown. Can we add Glenn and Marlene in with the family group? They drove all the way from Roanoke? Natalie added them. And actually, could you do a few extra detail shots of the table settings? Brooke spent weeks on those place cards. Natalie added them. A bridesmaid leaned over. Is it possible to get a separate group with the UVA girls? We haven't all been together since graduation. Natalie fitted in. Then Elaine added another extended family group. Natalie looked at the timeline on her phone. She'd built a 30-minute buffer between family formals and the reception entrance for exactly this kind of thing. 3 editions ago, the buffer had been intact. Now it was almost gone and the ceremony hadn't started yet. Which one do you want to trade for it? Elaine smiled. It's one quick picture. Natalie wrote the name down. Randall arrived at the venue about 2 hours before the ceremony. A few of the older relatives and some of the out-of-town guests had been texting him since the morning. None of them knew the wharf area, and the GPS kept routing people to the wrong entrance. When an aunt called to say she'd arrived but couldn't figure out which building to walk toward, Randall went out to the parking lot and walked her in. After that, he helped one of the older relatives carry a garment bag in a tote. And when another couple pulled in looking lost, he stood at the curb and pointed them toward the door. He'd always been the one who handled what happened outside the house. Elaine handled what happened inside it. That was the arrangement, and it had worked for as long as Natalie could remember. The second shooter arrived an hour before the ceremony. A woman named Demi, who'd assisted Natalie on 4 previous weddings and knew how to work without being directed. She brought her own bodies and lenses. Natalie had booked her through 7. On the original timeline, the toasts would have been over by then. Natalie briefed her on the timeline, pointed her toward the groomsmen's side of the venue to cover Kyle, his best man, and guests arriving, and kept herself with Brooke. The ceremony was at 4:30, outdoors, in the courtyard behind the venue. It was short and warm. Brooke cried a little during the vows. Kyle's hands shook when he put the ring on. Elaine sat very still in the front row with her hands folded in her lap, and Randall put his arm around the back of her chair without looking at her. Natalie shot from 2 angles, moved once during a reading to get the light behind Brooke's veil, and stayed out of the sightline. After the ceremony, guests moved to the cocktail hour. Natalie and Demi started family formals on the lawn near the courtyard, where the light was still good but wouldn't be for long. Late October in Staunton, sunset around 6:30, and the warm light would start thinning well before that. Natalie had maybe 45 minutes of usable light for formals and couple portraits. After that, everything moved indoors under venue lighting, which was fine for reception candids but not for the images that would go on the wall. She started with immediate family. Brooke and Kyle with both sets of parents. Then Brooke's family, Elaine, Randall, Brooke, Kyle, with Natalie behind the camera. Then Kyle's parents and siblings. Each group took 2 to 3 minutes. Arrange, check the light, shoot 3 frames, release. She moved to extended family. Uncle Glenn and Marlene from Roanoke. Kyle's grandparents who needed a chair brought out. A group with Brooke's college friend who'd been close enough to sit at the family table. Each one was on the list. Each one took time. After a frame with Elaine, Kathleen, and their siblings, 5 women and 2 men standing shoulder to shoulder, squinting a little in the low sun. Randall stepped back from the group. He noticed one of the older relatives struggling with a walker near the side ramp and held up a finger to Natalie. Then he crossed the lawn to help. Kathleen turned and looked at Natalie behind the camera. "Natalie, get in one with us." Demi was standing 3 feet away. She'd been shadowing the formals, picking up alternate angles. Natalie reached for her lens cap. She was about to set the camera down and step around to the other side. Elaine glanced at the line of relatives still waiting behind the group. "Let's get these first," she said. "We'll get Natalie in one later." Natalie looked at Kathleen. "It's fine. Go ahead." Kathleen held her gaze for a second. Something in her expression that Natalie couldn't quite place, and then stepped back into position. Natalie lifted the camera. Next group. Randall came back from the side ramp and stood off to the side, hands in his pockets, watching the group cycle through. He didn't ask what he'd missed. There was nothing to ask about. From where he stood, it looked like the photos were going fine. The coordinator came by and told Natalie that Brooke and Kyle needed to get outside the courtyard now if they wanted the golden hour light for portraits. Natalie checked the time. She had about 25 minutes before the light dropped below the tree line. She stopped the family formals, took the couple around the side of the courtyard to a quieter stretch beside the old warehouse and worked carefully. Brooke and Kyle walking along the brick wall. Brooke and Kyle standing near the edge of the lot, the hills beyond the rooftops going amber. Kyle's hand on the small of Brooke's back. Brooke laughing at something Kyle said, real unposed. The kind of frame that happened once and couldn't be asked for. Natalie got it. She checked the light. It was almost gone. They walked back inside. The cocktail hour was already running long, and guests were getting restless, drifting toward the ballroom doors. Elaine was waiting near the entrance. Several extended family groups still hadn't been photographed. Some of these people hadn't been in the same room in years, and they wouldn't be again soon. Natalie used what was left of the buffer. Elaine and Kathleen and their siblings again, a wider frame this time, all 7 of them. The older generation, anyone over 70. First cousins on Elaine's side. A subgroup of Kathleen's kids and their spouses. The coordinator came by twice to tell Natalie that the caterer was ready to open the ballroom doors. Then Elaine called over 3 women standing near the bar, friends from her garden club in Augusta County. Natalie shot it. Elaine turned and began waving toward another cluster of people. "We have to stop," Natalie said. "They need to seat people." Elaine looked at the group she'd been about to call over. She didn't argue. She just stood there for a moment, looking at the people who hadn't been photographed, as though she were memorizing which ones she'd missed. The picture Kathleen had asked for, the one with Natalie in it, had never been taken. No one circled back to it before the formals ended. The guests found their seats. Natalie glanced at the seating chart near the entrance to the ballroom as she passed. Bride and groom at the sweetheart table. Randall and Elaine at a family table nearby. Kathleen. Aunts and uncles and cousins distributed across the room. She scanned the whole chart. Her name wasn't on it. She already knew where she'd eat. The vendor meals were set up off the service corridor, the same place Demi would take her break. That wasn't what held her there. There was a table for her parents, for Kathleen, for aunts and uncles and cousins. There was nowhere in the room where anyone had expected Natalie to sit. She stood there for a moment. Then she went back to work. Once everyone was seated, Brooke and Kyle were introduced. Brooke looked happy, and Kyle looked like he might cry, which he handled by pressing his lips together and squeezing her hand. Their first dance was to a song Natalie didn't recognize. She shot it from 3 positions, moving along the edge of the dance floor, staying low, keeping out of the guests' sight lines. Servers brought out the first course, then the second. A string duo near the windows played something low and unhurried, the kind of music that let people talk without raising their voices. The room settled into the kind of noise that meant people were comfortable. Silverware, laughter, chairs scraping. Natalie moved between tables, picking up candies. A guest raising a glass. 2 women whispering during the salad course. Kyle's father watching his son from across the room, not knowing he was being watched. Natalie had done this at hundreds of receptions. She knew how to be in a room full of people without being noticed. It was part of the job. Maybe the most important part. You moved with the servers. You dressed in black. You kept the camera at your side when you weren't shooting so people forgot you had one. By the second course, most guests had stopped seeing her entirely. She was part of the room. She passed a table near the back, mostly guests from Kyle's side. People she hadn't met, people who didn't know her face. A woman was leaning toward the person next to her. Brooke has a sister. Right? Yeah. I think she's the photographer. Oh. The woman looked around the room. Which one? The one in black, I think. Natalie walked past them with the camera at her side. Neither of them looked up. She kept moving. She shot a candid of Randall and Kyle's father at the family table. Randall with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled to the forearm. A half-eaten plate in front of him. A glass of wine in his hand. Leaning back in his chair the way men did when they'd finished the hard part of the day and could finally stop. Kyle's father was turned toward him, saying something that made Randall nod slowly. Neither of them looked up when Natalie passed. She moved on to the next table. Demi crossed her path near the service entrance. I'm gonna grab dinner, she said. I'll be back in 15 and take over for you. I'm fine? Just be back before toasts. Demi nodded and disappeared through the side door. Natalie kept shooting. By the time Demi was back, dinner service was well underway. The coordinator had shifted the timeline so speeches could begin while guests finished eating, a way to keep the reception from running too late after the family formals had eaten into the buffer. If they start before I'm back, you's got them, Natalie told her. Demi nodded. This was the best window Natalie was going to get to eat. Natalie found Elaine near the service corridor behind the ballroom. I'm gonna go eat. Demi's covering the room. 15 minutes. Elaine looked toward the tables. Speeches are about to start. She can handle it. I haven't eaten since this morning. Elaine opened her clutch. She reached inside and pulled out 3 hard butterscotch candies wrapped in gold foil. She pressed them into Natalie's palm. Have these. Just hang in there a little longer. Natalie looked down at her hand. Brooke appeared from the hallway looking for Elaine. She caught the end of it. I just need 15 minutes, Natalie said. Demi's in there. Brooke looked at her. Then at the 3 candies in her hand. But you're the one I trust with this. She said it simply, the way she'd said other things over the years. The night she'd called Natalie after a breakup. The night Natalie had driven across town and stayed until midnight even though she'd had a deadline, and when she'd finally left. Brooke had said, I knew you'd come. It was the same voice. The same certainty that Natalie would stay. She's good, Brooke. She can cover 15 minutes. I just don't want to have to worry about the photos. Brooke's voice tightened. I thought this was your gift to me. From inside the ballroom, the coordinator called Brooke's name. Brooke looked at Natalie for one more second. Then she turned and went in. Behind Natalie, one of Elaine's garden club friends had stopped a server and was pointing at something on her table. Elaine saw it, said, "Excuse me," and walked over. Natalie stood in the corridor, 3 butterscotch candies in her hand. Through the doorway she could see servers carrying plates of hot food to tables where everyone she knew was sitting. She closed her fingers around the candies. She found Demi. "Are you free until 8? Demi checked the time. "Until 8, yeah." Natalie asked if she could take over the rest of the coverage through 8 o'clock. She offered double the hourly rate for the extra time. Demi looked surprised but said yes. Natalie walked her through what was left on the timeline. She found the coordinator. "Demi's covering through 8. Everything else stays the same." The coordinator looked at her. "Everything okay? I need to leave." The coordinator nodded. Natalie went to her gear, packed it up, and carried it to her car. The 3 butterscotch candies were in her pocket. She started the engine, pulled out of the lot, and drove home. The reception went on without her. Demi finished coverage at 8, confirmed with the coordinator, and packed up. At some point during the open dancing, Kathleen found Brooke near the dance floor and asked, "Did you ever get a picture with Natalie?" Brooke looked around the ballroom. Then she asked Elaine. Then Randall. Nobody knew. Brooke found the coordinator, who told her that Natalie had handed off the remaining coverage to Demi and left the venue earlier that evening. She left? Yes. That night, Natalie's phone rang. She was sitting on her couch in the dark, still in the black clothes she'd worn all day. The screen said, "Dad." She watched it ring until it stopped. A few minutes later, it rang again. She'd been 17, standing at a school ceremony without either of her parents there. Later, when Randall heard about it, he'd said, "You were fine though. You always are." She'd taken it as a compliment. She let the phone ring out. Before bed, she made herself do the part of the job she never skipped. Cards into the reader. Files onto the laptop and 2 external drives. Then a quick spot check of each copy to make sure the transfers were good. Sunday morning, she didn't go to the farewell brunch. Around noon, a text from Elaine. It was long. Brooke had found out in the middle of the reception that her sister had left. She'd been upset. Relatives had asked where Natalie was, and no one had an answer. At minimum, Elaine wrote, Natalie could have told Brooke or one of her parents before she walked out. The last line read, "I don't understand why you chose Brooke's wedding to make a point." Natalie read it twice. Her mother genuinely didn't understand. She never had to. For as long as Natalie could remember, Elaine had carried a quiet certainty about her older daughter. She'd said it to relatives, to friends, to Randall, always lightly, always with something like pride. "She's the one I never have to worry about." Natalie set the phone down and didn't reply. Later that afternoon, Demi sent over the files from the remaining coverage. Natalie paid her the overtime she'd promised and added the files to the laptop and both backup drives. A week passed. She didn't see Brooke. She didn't see Elaine or Randall. Randall sent a short text, "Call me when you're ready to talk," and left it at that. The following Friday, Kathleen called. "You free for dinner tonight?" Natalie drove out to Kathleen's house after work. It was quiet there. Kathleen's kids had grown and moved away years ago. Her husband, a dry, private man no one in the family talked about much, had died 3 years back. Kathleen had made pork shoulder braised with apples and onions, slow cooked since the afternoon, the whole house warm with it. Green beans on the side. She'd set 2 places at the kitchen table with cloth napkins, which was more than she usually did for herself. They ate and talked about nothing important. A neighbor was getting a new roof. A shop Kathleen liked had changed owners. The green beans were from her garden, the last of the season. When they were almost done, Kathleen got up to refill their water glasses. She set Natalie's glass down in front of her and stayed standing for a moment, her hand on the back of her own chair. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Natalie was quiet for a while. Then she told her. The seating chart with no place for her. They'd counted her with the vendors. She told her about the butterscotch. When she got to what Brooke had said, "You're the one I trust with this," her voice caught. And she stopped. Kathleen didn't interrupt. She sat with it. Then, after a while, she said, "That night at school, the awards thing." She looked at Natalie. "You told me you were fine then too." Natalie hadn't thought about that in a long time. She'd been 17. The yearbook staff awards were the same night as Brooke's 8th grade choir concert. Randall was out of town. Elaine called Kathleen and asked if she could go to one of them. Kathleen said yes. Elaine chose Brooke because Brooke had been nervous about the concert for days. Natalie had said, "It's fine, go with Brooke." Kathleen had come to the awards. Natalie sat at the kitchen table and didn't say anything. Kathleen didn't say anything else either. She didn't say they were wrong or you deserve better, or I'm sorry that happened to you. She just sat there across the table in the quiet house. After a while, Natalie helped clear the dishes. When Natalie picked up her jacket and moved toward the door, Kathleen went to the counter and came back with a container of the braised pork, already packed, the lid pressed down tight. "Take this with you." Natalie took it. "Thanks, Kathleen." At the door, Kathleen said, "Drive safe." Natalie walked to her car. She set the container on the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove home. 2 weeks after that, she delivered Brooke's gallery. 1,200 images. Every formal, every candid, every detail shot Elaine had asked for. And a few she hadn't. There wasn't a single family portrait with Natalie in it. In a handful of dummies' frames, Natalie appeared at the edge of the room or behind a raised camera, half turned out of focus, working. Brooke texted, "These are beautiful." Natalie replied, "I'm glad." She didn't hear from Elaine. Later that night, Randall called again. This time she picked up. He didn't mention the wedding. He asked if she'd gotten her furnace checked before winter. She said she'd handle it. He said he knew a guy if she needed one. She said okay. They were quiet for a few seconds. "All right," he said, "call if you need anything." "I will." She wasn't sure if that was true, but it was the first thing either of them had said in weeks, and neither of them hung up right away. 8 months later, things with her family had settled into something quieter. Natalie saw Brooke every few weeks now, usually for lunch or coffee, sometimes at their parents' house. They talked about work, Kyle, the house Brooke and Kyle were trying to buy. Elaine still called, though less often, and somewhere along the way she had started asking, "Are you free?" before telling Natalie what she needed. Randall remained Randall. He sent her the name of a plumber and reminded her about her inspection sticker in April. Nobody had ever sat down and resolved what happened that night. Natalie had stopped waiting for them to. On Fridays, she sometimes drove out to Kathleen's for dinner. She had started keeping one weekend a month empty. And for the first time in years, she didn't fill it when someone asked. Wedding season came around again. She raised her rates and hired Demi for most of the weddings she booked. In the desk drawer, the 3 butterscotch candies were still there. She hadn't eaten them. She hadn't thrown them away either.